I'm the co-founder of Omniscient. We do SEO, content marketing, digital PR, and all of this is in pursuit of revenue and business outcomes for B2B brands. A big part of that is AI search. More and more users, and especially business buyers, are introducing LLMs at the earliest touch points in the customer journey. Now it's more important for brands to show up there. I was in experimentation and analytics, so I worked on growth at HubSpot, experimentation at Workato, and then a couple early stage startups before that, LawnStarter and CXL. I think we're 34-ish employees, growing.
Want to attract and convert more leads? Want to learn how digital PR, branding, and SEO can establish and build your brand identity? Welcome to the Market Movers Building Brands and Links with Linkify podcast. We answer these questions and help you ramp up your brand visibility and credibility. Let's cut through the noise and make your business the talk of the town. We're your hosts, Nick and Chris. Let's get this show on the road.
Welcome to the Market Movers podcast. Today we are joined by Alex Birkett, who is the co-founder of Omniscient Digital and former growth leader at HubSpot and Workato, to break down how AEO, GEO, AIEO, SEO, any form of three-letter synonym you can think of, is going to talk to us about rewriting the rules of organic search, attribution, and brand visibility. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thank you very much. And I'll do my best. It's a very chaotic landscape out there right now in AI land.
To start things off, give us some background info on you. Tell us what you do.
I'm the co-founder of Omniscient, and we are an organic growth agency. So we do SEO, content marketing, digital PR, and all of this is in pursuit of revenue and business outcomes for B2B brands. Now, a big part of that is AI search. Obviously, we look at organic surface areas as, comprehensive and mostly related to SEO, like classic Google. But now more and more users, and especially business buyers, they're introducing LLMs at the earliest touch points in the customer journey. So now it's more important for brands to show up there. And obviously there's a paradigm shift and some measurement shifts that go along with that. And then before that, I was in experimentation and analytics. So I worked on growth at HubSpot, experimentation at Workato, and then a couple early stage startups before that, LawnStarter and CXL. I think we're 34-ish employees, growing.
Okay.
Live in New York City. Have a dog named Biscuit.
Very nice. Why Biscuit?
Actually, my co-founder David, who I guess is his godfather at this point, named him. He was a foster dog, and I brought him on a trip to Colorado with a little group friend trip, and his name at the time was Little Dude. Like, somebody who found him was just like, oh, this is Little Dude. And David's like, you can't call him Little Dude. He's got to have a name. And I was like, well, what's his name? And he's like, Biscuit. So kind of stuck.
Yeah, it's a good dog. Right?
He looks like a biscuit.
That's cool. So you talked about shifting the mindset then. So what is the biggest shift you think that marketers still haven't made when it comes to AI-driven discovery?
It's a really interesting question. I think that by and large, marketers tend to overlook. So with marketing, a lot of the times you're operating through a channel, right? Like, you're a social media marketer, you're an SEO, you're a paid acquisition marketer, and you focus on LinkedIn ads, and you think mostly about the channel, which is like the distribution mechanism. And then there's the content, or what you're delivering through the distribution mechanism, which for SEO is like a content page, or, a homepage or a pricing page. And then there's the audience who actually is consuming that content product. And I think marketers generally overlook the consumer. And I wind that up to say that I think the biggest shift is on the consumer behavior side of things, and less so on the tactical side of things. There's a reallocation of what matters and what's valuable and what quote unquote works for AEO versus SEO. But if you boil it down and you just sort of like took the names away and looked at what people are advising for AEO or GEO, people are like, oh, you got to have structured content, clear headers in natural language, listicles, and bottom of the funnel works really well. Mm-hmm. If you didn't know that was in the context of AEO, you'd just be like, that's good SEO, right? Mm-hmm. So the consumer behavior side is really the big shift, in that you're no longer sort of manually parsing through a bunch of information and pages to find the right answer for your situation. You're expecting an answer, and it's a culmination and sort of a synthesis of a bunch of different information that comes from your website, other competitor websites, Reddit, YouTube. Like, it's pulling insights and information from all over the place, and the end consumer is getting a single answer in an interface that's mostly untrackable from a click-based perspective. Mm-hmm. So that's the big change.
So let's talk about like, what do you do with that? I totally agree. Although I think a lot of people who are giving geo advice, it's like they're selling an SEO product, so they just kind of like they repackage it and they say now it works for geo.
Yeah.
But I agree. It is focusing on that in consumer, which you were supposed to be doing all along. Getting away from like we've created this content to rank in Google. Now it's actually for someone. But let's talk about how do you turn that into an actual strategy? You mentioned like ChatGPT, the other AI chatbots, they're pulling from all these different places. I think for a lot of people, when they listen to that, they think like, great, now I need to go be on, 20 different places. So how do you turn that into like an actionable strategy?
So it really roots back into, I think, foundational marketing practices. First and foremost, I think it's important to define the landscape in which you're competing. So what are the category entry points that matter to your business? For instance, and this is like core positioning work, right? For instance, Omniscient, we want to be known as an organic growth agency, which is not the most common parlance. So like also people could be searching for an SEO agency or a content marketing agency or a digital PR agency. You figure out what categories are already, associated with what you do, because you don't want to be sort of reinventing the wheel or sort of, you could do category creation, but you want something people already are searching for. So think about like what that is for you. And then also the pain points that are associated with that. So before somebody knows they need an SEO agency, what problems could be leading towards that solution, right? A traffic dropped. What the hell's going on with AI search, right? That's an interesting problem and pain point that leads a lot of people to us. So you sort of map out that landscape, and then you need to figure out what your current visibility is in relation to those prompts. So it's not so much as like a keyword and if your website ranks for it, but if somebody searches best SEO agencies or, best SEO agencies in New York City, in ChatGPT, in Gemini, in Perplexity, what percentage of the time are we mentioned in the output? And it's probabilistic. It's not like a ranking thing. It's not like we're going to be always mentioned every single time. It's like over the course of a month, over the course of 1,000 runs of that prompt, what percentage of the time are we mentioned and in relation to our competitors, right? So that's the first step, is understanding your baseline visibility. From there, it's really about understanding why those answers are coming to be. So it's looking into the citation sources. So it's difficult to effectuate anything on the training data level, except over the very long term. So most of the time, you're going to want to ground a ChatGPT answer in web search. And then you can look and see what citation sources it's pulling from. Is it taking content from your own website? Is it taking content from other editorial websites like Listicles, listing the best SEO agencies? Are you listed on those? Are you not on those? Is Reddit coming up often? And then I think you can get into the tactics, right? You're really looking for gaps and opportunity areas where you could be creating content, or you could be mentioned in content that already exists and is already influencing the outputs there.
That's super interesting. Do you think that this strategy is a short-term gap, though, when it comes to measurement? I think Sam Altman recently said that personalization inside of the models is going to become so ingrained that someone who's ChatGPT will know that they're a vegan that only eats Manuka honey, and they're looking for best swim shorts, and there's 5 companies that make their swim shorts with vegan based Manuka honey, and those are the brands that are going to be recommended to them. So is this something which we're going to see is gets harder, and it's a short-term solution to measurement? And how are we able to present this, or you able to present this to clients in terms of like a success for the strategy?
Yeah. Can vegans eat honey?
Oh, that's a good point, actually.
I get what you're saying, though. And I think that's one of these minefields, or like this is one of those things that breaks the paradigm of SEO, where people, there's a huge argument, which I don't like to get into, which is like, is GEO just SEO? I think this is one of those areas where you're like, well, no, it clearly can't be, because you can't like deterministically say you're going to rank when there's so much variance in the input, which is going to be the user, their memory, the personalization. There's so many different factors. Even for me, like best SEO agency, which seems very simple, very, very like high level, it knows that I live in New York City. So it often will pull local results for local SEO agencies in New York City. So how do you deal with that? I don't think there's a great answer in terms of the existing telemetry. I actually think you need to shift towards more of a brand marketing mindset and think about share of voice. I think you need to build a comprehensive set of prompts. So instead of tracking one single instance of best SEO agencies, I would think about what forms a cluster that you can build a little bit larger of a sample size. So I think law of large numbers helps out here. And then you can do some sort of approximation of personas. It's not going to be perfect because it splinters down to an N of one. But if you I think Profound and a couple tools actually allow you to do segmentation by different personas. If you can, in the prompt, speak about some of those details, and if you can use your actual customer data to build a representation of who a general cohort of people is going to be, right? It might not get down to the vegan or like this preference or like this specific city, right? But if you have done proper customer research, you can probably segment out a couple, demographic and psychographic traits and represent that within the prompt. It's not going to be the exact representation because, again, we don't know how the memory is working and how that's playing into the outputs, but you can get a good modeled representation of your visibility. And where it gets interesting is then comparing it among different segments. So if you have a persona, like if we have a persona for like a VP of marketing at a enterprise company and then like a founder of an early stage startup, how does our visibility for SEO agency related queries, how does it differ across those two? Because then I can use that, I can action on that and say, okay, we're way underrepresented for the enterprise, so therefore we should put more effort into our marketing and our messaging as it relates to that persona. I think with this, it's not like you don't want to seek perfect data. I think that's like the paradigm we need to get away from. But you want it to be actionable. You want to be able to use this to fuel some sense of marketing investment.
How important is it to really figure out your specialization? Because I think for a lot of companies, even big companies, they haven't really nailed that down. They're kind of broad. They're not they're generalist, not specialist. And then as these models move more towards that, more towards like the personalization aspect, how important do you think that will be to actually say like this is what we're going to specialize in? I know this is like basic marketing, but and positioning. But as for the AI strategy, what do you think about that?
I think that's one of the most important things and the biggest shifts. I think people will also say, oh, that was always part of good SEO, but like in practice, most SEOs did not care about your positioning and product marketing, right? It's pulling that in from your website as a direct source, like even though it is biased, quote unquote. So being very concrete and specific about who you serve, what you do, what your features are, how that plays into the benefits and pain points that your users want. That's like the root level. And then how that gets distributed or echoed through content on the web. Like oftentimes people are pulling from your website when they're writing new listicles and instances of new, placements on review sites. So the first and foremost step is to define that and accurately and sort of specifically architect your messaging around that. Because it's not just visibility. It's like your first touch point with a user or prospect, it could be completely invisible to you and something your salesperson cannot actually effectuate. So it's like ChatGPT is kind of your first sales touch point. So how you're communicated, how your differentiation is communicated is going to be the first perception that somebody gets of your brand. And oftentimes it's coming from your website. So if it's unclear, if it's vague, it's going to be unclear and vague in the outputs of AI.
That's a great answer. You mentioned earlier about listicles. Only about 23% of citations of branded queries come from owned properties. So we know long gone are the days of good old SEO where our website was our sort of place where we could effectuate so much change, and all we needed from externally was like backlinks. But now we need to be included in other people's properties. So what strategies are there for that sort of listicle inclusion? Do you think that it's an effective strategy? Do you think it's a long-term play as well? Do you think the models will always be pulling from listicles, or is that might that change?
I don't think anything is like a sure bet for the long term. And I think when there's an easy arbitrage or a sort of gamification of an algorithm, I think the loophole tends to close if the user experience degrades. So writing a bunch of listicles is very easy to do. Almost anybody can do it. And at some endpoint, it's going to reduce the quality of the output. So I would say that long-term bet, that's probably not going to be the most advantageous thing to do. Okay, so for branded queries, that's such an interesting. So that was research that Kate on our team put together for branded prompts. So like if somebody's searching specifically for Omniscient Digital, if they already know us and they're like, hey, is this a good agency? Can you review them? How do they compare to a competitor? It's actually only pulling, from our website a very small percentage of the time. Um, it's kind of like, so the question before this was sort of around product marketing and foundational positioning and messaging, and I think that's cool. Like it's basically more important now, right? And then I think on the other side, you've got PR and brand marketing as being more important now for SEO than it was before. So how do you get in the external off-page earned media sites? First, you need to understand which ones are important. So on your question on the listicles, that's a really tactical question. Can you do outreach to get on competitor listicles? Like, will they put you on their listicle? I think it depends how close of competitors you are. There's probably indirect competitors or complementary startups or companies, who you could sort of do swaps with. And, that's kind of one of those gray areas where it's not as spammy as just, publishing 1,000 of your own self-promotional listicles. But, I'll put this brand on my best SEO agency's list if they put us on theirs, right? Like that's a way you can get in. A lot of it now is, pay to play. So it's like it's similar to the affiliate model. But now it's not click based, right? Affiliate used to be, somebody clicks on your link and you get a commission if somebody purchases. Now, a lot of these affiliate sites are just paying for the inventory. So the placement on that list. So I think that's going to be increasingly common. I'd look into partnerships. So if you are a software company and you've got integration partners, channel partners, agency partners, like that's a really good win-win synergistic strategy. And then there's surface areas that they've always been important, but now they're getting surfaced in the outputs of LLMs. So you've got review sites like G2, who just bought Capterra and a bunch of other review sites. So I feel like they're going to be the kingmakers now. And that tactic or that strategy is going to be largely, based on your customer satisfaction and your ability to get customers to evangelize for you. So that's going to be running, customer review campaigns and making sure that you're listed in the right categories. And, I believe on some of those platforms, it's a sort of pay to play model as well. So you can sponsor your placements, which may or may not help your AI visibility. I haven't looked into that deeply. And then there's tougher areas too. Like Reddit is very tough to crack. There's obviously tactics that you can try out and experiment with, but ultimately it's powerful because it's user generated content and people like its authenticity. So it's tough to go in there and say, hey, I come from brand A, my product is the best because X, Y, and Z. Like it's a really good way to get banned from subreddits.
Yeah.
So you've sort of got different layers of like how hard or how easy it is to get listed and included in those. And like, this is a very hand wavy answer, but the best thing to do is upstream of all of that, just be the obvious brand that has to be included in the conversation, which is obviously it's like hand wavy advice for a startup who's just starting out. But, for a category like CRM, like Salesforce has to be in it because they're CRM, like it's so inherently associated with the category. So that's where you get into some of the, upstream, broader, brand marketing and just being a brand that's worth talking about.
Yeah. And I think that's great for these big companies, but the companies with the smaller marketing teams, I think the thing they should do is think about, all right, like this channel, trying to get on this listicle, is this good for our exposure overall? Like if you take out the AI SEO part, does this help us? And if not, maybe like if you don't have the resources to do everything at once, then you can focus on that. Because there are plenty of things that if you get featured in this listicle, people actually read this and they will check out those companies and it helps your AI SEO. So I think it can be figure out what's going to work outside of AI SEO. I always stumble over that one. And then, I think you're building your brand alongside your AI strategy. But one thing I think is a little less clear is around so we've talked about bottom of the funnel terms with these prompts. Now, when people are doing the research, they're not yet looking for a service provider. This is where that more informational content, the top of the funnel, ChatGPT, the other AI models, they're not typically like recommending someone. You're saying, how do I do this? I need to fix this or do this. And it's giving you ideas, frameworks, strategies, and it's pulling from people's content, but not saying, go check this person or this company. Do you have any ideas on how to use that sort of stage to get exposure in ChatGPT?
Yeah. First off, I just want to point out that your heuristic on basically subtracting AI search and asking the thought experiment, would this still be valuable? That's something I use all the time. And I think that's one of the best mental models because it sort of brings it down to first principles and says, like, if AI weren't a thing, like, would this still be valuable or would it be incredibly risky? And if it's incredibly risky, you got to, think twice before you do it. So, earlier stage, top of the funnel, mid funnel. Yeah, I mean, you're getting fewer clicks to your site, so you have less trackable value. Is it still valuable to, sway some of the narrative around the pain points that somebody would be dealing with? Theoretically, yes, especially if you have a, solution that has, a unique like solve for the problem that somebody's dealing with. So, I could imagine like AI native startup who, they want to kind of sway the conversation around, let's say hiring and recruiting, and maybe somebody would be searching for, how do I set up a recruiting process or how do I, optimize my recruiting process? The old paradigm and a lot of the content might be absent of any AI solutions, but now you can create content that we've set in and says, hey, you can actually, you can use AI to screen resumes, and that's going to save a ton of time, especially at scale. And if you provide that answer, you've got some semblance of chance of being included or even mentioned as a brand that could help do that. So I think thinking about narrative and how you can influence that is interesting, even absent clicks. But on the brand mentions in the outputs, certainly if you're asking for a list of brands, it's going to give you a list of brands. However, some of our research, again, Kate on our team did this research on sort of top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel prompts. And I know those customer journey stages are like very wishy-washy and everybody's got different definitions of them. But if you think of the highest level of being a sort of what is or a conceptualization of a problem space, what is marketing automation? What is AEO? And then the middle of the funnel being sort of like, I've got a specific problem within this. How do I do something? I've got a job to be done, a use case, right? How do I invest in AI search? Her research found that a substantial portion of the time, actual brands and products are getting mentioned in the outputs. It's not as high as, give me a list of the best AEO tools, but it was somewhere between 10 and 30%, depending on the industry and the topic matter. So I actually had something like that happen with me recently where my oven was smoking and I tried to clean it and it didn't work. It kept smoking. So I was like, what's going on here? And in the output, it gave me, 5 or 6 solutions that I could try out. And within one of them, it gave me a specific brand and product of oven cleaner. So I ended up buying that. I went to Amazon and bought that specific brand. So I still think it's important to associate with those earlier stages because that's probably where a lot of the attention is going to flow. There's probably a lot more volume and a higher ceiling of influence that you can impact that stage. It's just this comes back to the tracking paradigm. You're not going to see you're not going to see a lot of traffic from that. And I think that's something that marketers have to get used to. I'll add one more thing there. I think in certain spaces, especially fast moving and sort of non-consensus spaces, so answers haven't solidified. This is very apparent in AI spaces and especially AI search. I think original research and providing proprietary data, it gets cited more often. There's been studies around that if you have unique and novel data. I think that can be very valuable at the earlier customer journey stages. And the cool thing about that, Nick, is like this heuristic on without AI search, would this still be interesting? That's one of those tactics that you're like, absolutely it would, right? I can share that on social media. I can run webinars on that. I can cite the statistics in podcasts like this. So even outside of AI search, that stuff is very good at just sort of driving narrative impact. And we do see that it shows up quite a bit, especially in sort of deep research agents.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, it's definitely not a waste of time for that to be a marketing effort. What other content strategies can smaller businesses utilize then on their own website that you think's working now that can drive significant AI discoverability?
It's going to depend a lot on what your business does. So there's going to be certain advantages that you have if you're a product-led growth company with say many horizontal use cases. But in that case, like I think templates and jobs to be done driven content, you can run those at scale, because then you can hit so many of the long tail queries, which is more apparent in AI. Like people have these very specific prompts. I need to do X, Y, and Z. I'm this size of company. I use this tech stack. So if you have like this long tail of programmatic or semi-programmatic pages around what your product does, think of like a no code or low code app builder or website builder. You can have thousands of use cases across restaurants and lawn care companies and agencies. So that could be a really interesting play. I look at that as very middle of the funnel. An underrated one for B2B generally is YouTube. And I know this isn't like classic SEO or on your website, but it's incredibly influential, especially for Google's AI tools, so Gemini and AI mode and AI overviews. It's cited very frequently. And the thing with B2B is like most people don't do good video content. So it's fairly easy to compete here. Like everybody's writing listicles, but no one's doing the video stuff. So it's like there's less competition and less saturation. So I think video in many spaces is very useful. And you can do a sort of integrative play where you can work with influencers and external partners to create content around what you do. So it's not just your videos saying like, hey, we're the best agency in the world, check us out. You can look at what's being cited and partner with others to create a surround sound effect there. And then for more technical, developer tools, anybody who's targeting technical audiences, documentation is very impactful now. So again, this gets into the specificity, which is like, how do I do X, Y, and Z? Can I do X, Y, and Z with this tool? Can I integrate this with this software tool? All of those deeply technical questions, which it's not going to warrant a long form blog post or a product page. Those are really useful to put in documentation and make sure that your documentation is being cited.
I want to go back to the YouTube, because I think that is such a good opportunity. And obviously it's a lot harder. You can easily churn out a bunch of listicles, distribute them, but YouTube content it's much harder. And then a lot of people struggle like to get started. Like we've done some YouTube content and we're like, how do you even get started? You look at all these channels that are very polished. And so it can be quite intimidating. What kind of content do you think is the best fit for YouTube? You're talking about top of the funnel, you're talking about very technical content, or comparison content. What do you think? Is it good for all kinds of content, or is there a certain kind that you think works better? Specifically looking at like what ChatGPT would be more likely to pull from.
That's also a really good question. It's something that I'm actively working on for our own brand right now, because I think we've under-indexed on video ourselves. Cobbler's kids have no shoes. We are going to index on how-tos and deep tutorials around the stuff that we work on with clients. I think that's a good way to get into that middle of the funnel and pain point area. With a lot of our clients, what we're seeing is bottom of the funnel content, but this is where it gets tricky. It's a lot of influencers and affiliates and sort of individual creators who are doing deep dives on lists of the best products in a category. I think it's very awkward for a brand to do that, especially at scale. It becomes very apparent and self-promotional, and I see that loophole as being it's a weird thing to do right now, but I also think that is probably not a loophole that's going to be open forever. So if you're in one of those spaces, a popular category, like if you think productivity tools, there's tons and tons of YouTubers who are like, here's my productivity stack. Here's the top 10 tools I use. Number 1, Notion. Number 2, and they go through these, and it's like very creator type content. So I think that's going to be the bulk of it. For us and any more sort of like, what's the word that I want to use here? Like knowledge-based space, like agencies or whatever. Like I think you want to get into like how to do certain things, trends, like anything that would be sort of narrative architecture. What are the best AEO metrics? What is content engineering? This is where you can kind of get more to that top of the funnel, because you're going to be cited at the top of that journey with your your video content. So that's probably going to be our play.
I feel like for the past 3 years, we've had a number of guests on that have said video is so underrated. And it's like, I definitely missed the boat, the crypto wave came and went and completely missed it. But I feel like video is still definitely an option for closing the gap on some of this AI visibility. I don't know how much longer.
Even before AI, I remember in like 2016, like going to conferences and these were like conversion optimization conferences, and people would be like, this is the year of video. Like you want video on your website. Like it's not just static images. Like people want to see like it in motion. And still, like at scale, people haven't taken that advice.
Yeah, including us.
Yeah, including me.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, Alex, this has been great. Anyone watching that's got zero AI visibility and wants to be visible inside of LLMs within 90 days, what can they do? Where would they start?
Well, I think it's important to look at your own data. So this is going to be a boring answer, but you could see a lot of like industry data and high level trends, and this is interesting stuff like Profound and Ahrefs and SEMrush put these mega studies out. We analyzed 100 million prompts, and Reddit's the top citation source or something like that. It's interesting academically, but important for you is going to be to look at your own sort of category prompts, pain point prompts, and figure out, are you showing up? Are you not showing up? And then look at the citation sources for your unique industry, because that's going to vary quite a bit. Even though we specialize in B2B, across our clients, it's very high variability, what citation sources actually matter. And then from there, I like this 3-prong model. So this is a good way to conceptualize how you can actually create impact. So first is be the source, right? And that's going to look a lot like SEO or content creation.
Mhm.
Identify gaps where you're currently not the citation source and create content that is best in class, like answers the question better than anybody else does, is high quality. Don't do the spray and pray. Just, I would index heavily on classic SEO principles like EAT. And then the second would be included in the source. So that's going to be looking at external websites. And those will vary again by industry, but your Reddits, your editorial lists, and figure out ways that you can, buy, partner, trade, basically get included in those lists.
Beg, borrow, steal.
Yeah, and those are the 90 days. And then our third prong is shape the narrative. So that goes into more of the narrative architecture and influence upstream. And that would be brand marketing, original research, figuring out what questions people are answering before they even know they have a problem. The YouTube videos. And I think that's like the top of Maslow's hierarchy. Once you sort of saturate like the bottom of the funnel for what content gaps on your own website exist, and then the obvious listicles and sort of review sites you should be in. So I would look at those first two levers first.
That's great.
Awesome. Alex, it's been great having you on. For people who want to connect with you, where can they go?
Our website, beomniscient.com. Good luck spelling it.
Good luck saying it. I had to say it five times on our podcast intro.
It's a unique brand name, but yeah, it's hard to say and spell. So we do a weekly newsletter, and then we try to do a podcast a week, but we usually do like 2 or 3 a month. And then my LinkedIn, so I'm trying to post on there more as well. I mean, that's just Alex Birkett, or I am Alex Birkett is the URL slug. So yeah, I think those are the best places.
That's awesome. And one more time, how do you say the name?
Omniscient.
Omniscient. Alex, thank you so much. You've been absolutely fantastic. Hopefully we'll speak soon. Take care.
Thank you very much.